Ethan, a humble janitor, was publicly humiliated by a millionaire at a lavish party. But when he took the microphone, he did something no one could ever imagine. Get ready because this story will deeply move you. Ethan, a humble janitor, was publicly humiliated by a millionaire at a lavish party. But when he took the microphone, he did something no one could ever imagine. Get ready because this story will deeply move you. Ethan moved discreetly through the event hall, holding a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other. The environment was impeccably decorated, with golden lights reflecting off the crystal chandeliers, tables covered with white linen tablecloths, and waiters circulating with trays full of champagne glasses. Soft music filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and animated conversations from the guests, all elegantly dressed. He knew he was not seen. To those people, he was just part of the scenery, like the chairs or the flower vases. Still, he performed his job carefully, ensuring that the shine of the marble floor remained perfect and that no accident drew attention. Lucas, the host, circulated with a satisfied smile. The businessman had the demeanor of someone who knew the world was at his feet. Occasionally, he cast critical glances around the hall, pointing out details he deemed inappropriate, but he never addressed Ethan directly. When a waiter dropped a glass, it was Ethan who hurried to clean up the shards and dry the floor before anyone slipped. No thank you was said, just the sound of heels and expensive shoes moving away. As he scrubbed a new wine stain near a table, he overheard fragments of conversations. "This party is wonderful. Lucas really knows how to impress," said a woman with a sparkling necklace. "Yes, he has the Midas touch. Everything he touches turns to gold," replied a man with an envious tone. Ethan lifted his eyes for a moment, observing the world to which he had never belonged. His simple uniform and calloused hands were a stark contrast to the suits and designer dresses around him. Still, he preferred to return to work, focusing on the task at hand. After all, that night, no one was interested in who the janitor was. Lucas moved with the confidence of someone who believed the world revolved around him. Every greeting he offered was accompanied by a rehearsed smile, firm handshakes, and comments that made his guests laugh as if he were the wittiest man at the party. The hall was his runway, and he knew it. He walked slowly, savoring every admiring glance and every murmur about his generosity and success. As he advanced through the space, waving to familiar faces and casting evaluative looks at the glasses the waiters carried, something in the corner of the hall caught his attention. There, bent over the gleaming floor, was Ethan, the janitor, carefully cleaning up the shards of a glass that someone had broken without even noticing. Ethan's humble posture, the way he seemed to avoid any eye contact with the guests, made Lucas smile in a way that revealed his disdain. He stopped next to a friend, a robust man in an impeccably tailored suit, and leaned slightly in his direction, whispering just enough for him to hear. "Look at that. Can you imagine that guy trying to blend in with us? It would be comical, don't you think?" Lucas let out a short, dry laugh, clearly pleased with himself. The friend, following Lucas's tone, looked in Ethan's direction and smirked, nodding. "Comical? It would be tragic. He wouldn't even know where to start," he replied. And they both laughed, their tones full of superiority echoing softly among the conversations in the hall. Lucas raised his champagne glass and took a sip, the smile still fixed on his face as he watched Ethan finish his work and stand up with the bucket in hand. It was then that an idea began to form in his mind. A mischievous glint passed through his eyes, and he looked back at his friend. "By the way," he began, leaning in again, "I just had a brilliant idea. How about we give him a moment to shine? Something to liven up the party?" The friend raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "What are you thinking?" Lucas stepped aside, making more room for other guests to pass, and cast a calculated glance around the hall. "Think about it. A situation where he becomes the center of attention, but of course, for the right or wrong reason. People will love it. It will be the story of the night." He finished his sentence with a laugh that carried a hint of cruelty. The friend, now intrigued, asked, "And how do you plan to do that?" Lucas smiled again, but this time his smile was almost predatory. "Leave it to me. Let's make this party even more memorable. Just wait and see." As he finished speaking, he turned to observe Ethan once more. now with eyes full of an intention that only he fully understood. Ethan, oblivious to the host's machinations, continued with his work, moving silently as always, cleaning the corners of the hall where no one else would look. For him, it was just another night of work amid the luxury that never included him. For Lucas, however, it was the perfect opportunity to reaffirm his position of power at the expense of the invisible man. The party was buzzing at its peak, a true spectacle of luxury and ostentation. The sound of the jazz band filled the hall, its elegant notes echoing in the corners as guests chatted and laughed loudly, wrapped in the vibrant atmosphere. Silver trays circulated through the space, carried by impeccable waiters offering sophisticated canapés and flutes of sparkling champagne. The glow of the chandeliers reflected on the marble floors, intensifying the sense of grandeur. Lucas, with the careless posture of someone who had already drunk too much, moved through the hall, dispensing haughty comments and exaggerated laughter. He had become the center of attention, as he always liked, and made sure to keep all eyes on him. With each new sip of champagne, his voice grew louder and his jokes bolder. "This, my friends, is what I call living well," he exclaimed, raising his glass as if toasting to himself. Suddenly, as if guided by a sudden inspiration, or the effect of alcohol, Lucas decided that the party needed an even more memorable touch. He jumped onto the stage without warning, interrupting the band with an exaggerated gesture. The lead singer, surprised, stepped back and handed over the microphone, while Lucas positioned himself at the center with the confidence of a seasoned presenter. "Ladies and gentlemen, attention, please," he began, grinning widely at the audience. "Tonight is not just a party, it's a celebration of success, the good life, and, of course, the exceptional company of all of you." A round of applause erupted, followed by some laughter encouraged by Lucas's relaxed tone. He leaned slightly over the microphone stand, as if about to share a secret. "But let's be honest," he continued, with a sly smile. "A good party needs stories, doesn't it? Something we can remember tomorrow and laugh until our stomachs hurt." Some muffled laughter echoed, and Lucas, encouraged, pressed on. "And my friends, I'm sure that tonight we will create one of those stories." He cast a glance toward the back of the hall, where Ethan, almost invisible amid the luxury, continued picking up discarded cups and napkins. Lucas watched the janitor for a few moments, his eyes half closed as an idea began to take shape. That mischievous smile that was characteristic of him reappeared. "But before anything else," Lucas said, turning back to face the audience, "let's enjoy the moment. I want everyone here to know that tonight is for you." More enthusiastic applause filled the hall as Lucas stepped down from the stage with confident strides, keeping Ethan in his line of sight. He returned to the center of the party, now with an almost Machiavellian glint in his eyes. Lucas was determined. The night was far from over, and he already had in mind how to make it unforgettable. The band stopped playing abruptly when Lucas climbed back onto the stage, holding the microphone with the ease of a game show host. He drummed his fingers on the pedestal, waiting for the buzz of conversations to cease. Gradually, the guests turned their curious gazes toward him as he raised a hand, asking for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying this evening as much as I am," he declared, his amplified voice filling the hall. Some timid applause broke out, followed by muffled laughter as Lucas smiled, savoring the moment. "You know I love a surprise, and today I decided it's time to do something different, something special." Lucas paused dramatically, sliding his eyes across the hall until they landed on Ethan, who was discreetly collecting some empty cups on a tray. A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes as he pointed directly at the janitor. "And there he is, our unofficial guest of honor, Ethan, the most dedicated janitor in this building. Let's give him a round of applause." The applause was hesitant at first, but soon intensified, with some guests laughing uncomfortably and others clapping more enthusiastically, following Lucas's lead. Ethan froze, surprised, looking around as if trying to confirm that it was indeed him. Realizing that all eyes were on him, he tried to take a step back, but Lucas wouldn't allow it. "Hey, come here, Ethan," Lucas called with the tone of someone who doesn't take no for an answer. "This is your chance to shine. Show everyone your talent. I bet you have something amazing to share with us." His voice carried a clear note of mockery, enough to provoke laughter from some of the closer guests. Ethan shook his head nervously and took a step back. I, I'm just here to work, sir. I don't need to do this, really. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the distance and the sound of murmurs in the hall. Oh, don't be so humble, Lucas insisted with a wide fake smile. Everyone here has a special talent. Come on, share yours. It could be singing, dancing, telling a joke, anything. The tone of his supposedly friendly voice contained a condescension that didn't go unnoticed. Ethan tried to refuse again, his expression growing more anxious by the second. Sir, I really can't. My job is to clean, and I— Exactly, Lucas interrupted, eliciting laughter from some of the guests. You've done that brilliantly, but now we want to see something different. After all, what's the fun of a party without a little entertainment, right, everyone? He looked at the audience, encouraging the laughter and applause that arose in response. The janitor looked around, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes on him. Some were curious, others clearly amused. But there were also those who seemed uncomfortable, realizing how humiliating the situation was. Despite this, no one intervened. Lucas on stage continued gesturing for him to come closer, his smile widening as Ethan remained frozen, struggling against the urge to simply drop everything and leave. Come on, Ethan, Lucas insisted, now clapping slowly to encourage him. It's just for fun. Don't be shy. The room erupted in a chorus of claps and laughter, partly encouraged by Lucas's insistence, partly just out of a desire to see what would happen next. Ethan, unable to resist the collective pressure, finally took a few hesitant steps toward the stage. His heart raced, and he could feel the heat rising in his face. For him, this was a nightmare. But for Lucas, it was just the beginning of his grand joke. Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath his feet as Lucas, with a firm arm around his shoulders, pulled him onto the stage. He tried to protest, mumbling something about needing to get back to work, but his voice was drowned out by Lucas's loud laughter and the ironic applause of some guests. Come on, Ethan, don't be shy. This is your big chance to shine, Lucas exclaimed, each word laced with a mocking tone that seemed to amplify Ethan's discomfort. The room, which had been buzzing with conversation and music, plunged into a strange, heavy silence. All eyes were fixed on the janitor, who was now standing under the stage lights. The heat from the lights made beads of sweat begin to form on his forehead as his eyes scanned the crowd for a friendly face. But all he saw were expressions ranging from mischievous curiosity to evident discomfort. Some people chuckled softly, others looked away, clearly embarrassed by the scene, but no one intervened. Lucas, savoring the moment like a conductor before his orchestra, placed the microphone in Ethan's trembling hands. There you go, my friend. The stage is all yours. What will it be? A dance number? An emotional song? Or maybe a funny story to make us laugh? His voice was loud and filled with false enthusiasm, as if he were announcing a great attraction. The cruelty in his tone, however, was unmistakable. Ethan held the microphone as if it were a strange and dangerous object. His trembling hands betrayed the nervousness he was trying to hide. I don't know how to do any of that, he managed to murmur, his voice so low it could barely be heard. The wavering words echoed through the hall, further breaking the tense silence. Oh, come on, Lucas insisted, leaning slightly toward the microphone, as if trying to encourage him. Don't be so modest. Everyone here has a talent, even if it's cleaning like no one else. He ended with a loud, exaggerated laugh, which was quickly joined by the laughter of some guests, although many of them clearly felt uncomfortable with the situation. Ethan's face burned with embarrassment. He felt the stares piercing into him like needles, each one increasing the pressure that already felt unbearable. The silence that followed Lucas's joke seemed to stretch the moment into infinity. Every second he stood there, exposed, made his whole body stiffen, as if he were being swallowed by the tension hanging in the air. Lucas, noticing that the silence was starting to become awkward even for him, stepped closer again. Come on, Ethan. Don't disappoint your audience. He gave a light pat on the janitor's back, forcing him to take a step forward. We're all waiting. Some people in the crowd murmured among themselves, as if questioning whether this had gone too far. One of the guests tried, without much enthusiasm, to change the course. "Lucas, maybe he doesn't want to." But the voice was drowned out by the laughter and gesturing of Lucas, who completely ignored the comment. Ethan, with his hands still trembling, brought the microphone to his mouth, but couldn't produce any sound. He knew that nothing he said or did at that moment would be enough to break the humiliating situation. The tension in the hall was almost palpable, like a rope stretched to its limit, about to snap. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the heart that seemed ready to leap from his chest, but his mind was blank, unable to think of anything beyond the desperate desire to escape from there. Ethan stood still on stage for a few seconds, as if the world around him had frozen. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to focus on something, anything, that would pull him out of that unbearable moment. Suddenly, a distant memory surfaced, his mother singing to him when he was a child, on calm and safe nights. It was a song he knew by heart, even after all these years. Before he could think twice, he opened his mouth and began to sing. The first sound that emerged was like a lightning bolt breaking the tense silence. A pure, powerful note filled the hall, reverberating off the decorated walls. Ethan's voice, unexpectedly rich and in tune, cut through the air as if it were something tangible, something no one expected. He started hesitantly, but soon found his rhythm, surrendering to the music with an intensity that seemed to come from a very deep place. Every word was laden with feeling. Every note filled the empty space with an almost palpable beauty. The whispers ceased instantly. The laughter, which moments before echoed through the hall, vanished as if it had never existed. The gazes, once filled with mockery or discomfort, were now fixed on Ethan, wide-eyed and incredulous. Some guests exchanged surprised glances, while others remained still, as if hypnotized by the power of that voice. Lucas, however, felt the impact the most. He was standing just a few steps away from Ethan, the smug smile gradually fading from his face as the notes of the song echoed through the hall. His expression, once full of confidence and sarcasm, now seemed lost, unable to process what was happening. He had expected Ethan to stumble, for his voice to go off-key, or for him to simply flee the stage in embarrassment. But what he received was the opposite: undeniable talent that now completely dominated the environment. As Ethan sang, his posture changed. The previously tense shoulders relaxed, and he seemed to grow under the spotlight. It was as if, for a few minutes, the stage truly belonged to him. The nervousness that had once held him back gave way to a quiet courage, fueled by the audience's unexpected reaction. He no longer needed to worry about the gazes. He was in another place, in a world where the music spoke for him. In the audience, some guests began to blink rapidly, fighting back tears that formed in their eyes. The sincerity in Ethan's voice was undeniable, touching something deep within each person present. A man discreetly wiped his eyes with a handkerchief, while a woman beside him murmured, "My God, this is beautiful." As Ethan progressed through his song, something extraordinary began to happen in the hall. Even before the music ended, some guests couldn't contain the impulse to applaud, as if they were taken over by a greater force. Words of admiration escaped in murmurs. "What a voice! This is amazing! I never expected anything like this." Expressions of disdain and discomfort transformed into genuine smiles, and in many cases, emotional glances. When Ethan reached the final note, filled with a sincerity and power that seemed to echo directly in the hearts of everyone present, the hall fell into a brief silence, not of embarrassment, but of reverence. It was as if the world had stopped for a moment, just to absorb the impact of what had just happened. Then, like an explosion, the sound of applause filled the space, first timid, then growing, until it turned into a standing ovation. Men and women rose from their seats, many still with tears streaming down their faces, clapping with enthusiasm and gratitude. Some shouted words of encouragement. "Bravo! Wonderful! I've never seen anything like it." Ethan stood still for a moment, his face lit up with surprise. He hadn't expected that reaction. He wasn't prepared to receive such a display of respect and emotion. With humility, he made a small gesture with his head in thanks, a shy smile forming as his eyes sparkled with something between relief and disbelief. He approached the pedestal, carefully placing the microphone on the stand, as if it were something sacred. He turned to the crowd, bowed slightly in a gesture of thanks, and without another word, began to descend from the stage. The sound of applause continued, like an endless wave of admiration that accompanied him as he crossed the hall to return to the back, where his work still awaited him. But the attention was no longer on Lucas. He, who had always been the center of attention at any event, now seemed small and out of place. He stood near the stage, his face flushed and his hands hanging at his sides, staring intently at Ethan. For a moment he tried to force a smile, as if he wanted to appear complacent with the unexpected success, but he couldn't hide the discomfort that consumed him. Around him, whispers began to grow. "What a horrible attitude," a woman whispered to the man next to her. "He just wanted to humiliate the guy. And look what happened." Another guest with a stern expression commented, "I never imagined Lucas was capable of something so petty." The disapproving glances fell on Lucas like invisible stones. He tried to ignore them, laughing softly as if he wanted to dissipate the tension, but there was no escaping it. The judgment of the guest was silent but deafening. For them, Lucas's grandeur, so carefully constructed, had been undone in a few minutes by the voice of a simple man he had tried to humiliate. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his corner, picked up the bucket and mop, and began to clean a forgotten corner of the hall, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the looks now followed him not with indifference, but with respect and even admiration. For many, he was no longer invisible. He was the soul of that night, the man who, unwittingly, had exposed the true face of the host and transformed the party into something that no one would ever forget. As Ethan returned to his corner, trying to resume his work as if nothing had happened, the buzz in the hall began to grow. The performance had left a mark that no one seemed willing to ignore. The guests, still moved by what they had just witnessed, started to whisper among themselves, trying to understand how such extraordinary talent could have gone unnoticed until that moment. It was then that a middle-aged man, impeccably dressed and with a thoughtful demeanor, began to move among the guests toward Ethan. He looked intrigued, his gaze fixed on the janitor, as if he were trying to fit a missing piece into a puzzle. As he approached, he politely waited for Ethan, who was crouched down picking up some papers, to stand up. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice low but filled with curiosity. You are Ethan Parker, aren't you?" The question hung in the air, and the buzz around them diminished as some people began to pay attention. Ethan looked at the man with a mix of surprise and caution. "I am Ethan, yes," he replied after a moment, his voice calm but restrained. He avoided the man's gaze, focusing instead on adjusting the trash bag he was carrying. The man stepped forward, now more animated. "No, but the Ethan Parker. I remember you. Years ago in New York. I was there, at Carnegie Hall. You had just won that talent contest. Your voice. It was something no one could forget. You were a rising star." His voice trembled with excitement, and his expression was that of someone who had just found a lost piece of history. Ethan paused, taking a deep breath. He knew that this conversation was inevitable after what had happened on stage. His eyes, which had previously avoided contact, now met the man's. He gave a small, polite smile, but there was something resigned in his expression. "Yes, sir," he confirmed. "I sang at Carnegie Hall once. It was a special moment for sure." The confirmation drew other guests nearby, curious to hear more. The buzz transformed into louder voices as people began to exchange information rapidly. "I knew I recognized that face," said a woman in a blue silk dress, squeezing the arm of the man beside her. "He was so young. Everyone talked about him as the next big star." Another older man commented thoughtfully, "And then he just disappeared. No one knew what happened." The first man, still standing before Ethan, asked the question that seemed to be on everyone's mind. "But what happened, Ethan? Why did you give it all up? You had so much talent, so much potential." Ethan smiled again, a polite smile full of melancholy. "I appreciate you remembering that truly. But they were personal decisions. Life sometimes takes us down paths we don't expect, and I needed to follow a different route. I'd prefer not to go into details if you don't mind." His tone was gentle but firm, making it clear that he was not willing to share more. Still, his words did not erase the wave of murmurs that now spread through the hall. People exchanged intrigued glances, some still surprised, others lamenting what seemed like a great loss for the music world. Lucas, who remained by the stage, was visibly unsettled. He heard the murmurs, observed the looks of admiration and empathy directed at Ethan, and felt a mix of disbelief and discomfort growing within him. The center of attention, which had once been his guaranteed position, was now occupied by someone he had tried to humiliate. Worse still, the guests were now whispering about his petty behavior, comparing it to Ethan's humility. "I had no idea he was a singer," Lucas heard one of the guests say. "Lucas just treated him like a nobody. What a disgrace." "A talent like that being treated this way? Truly lamentable," murmured another, shaking his head in disapproval. Lucas tried to save face, forcing a smile and taking another sip of champagne, but the discomfort was etched on his face. He knew he had lost control of the night, and worse, his reputation among the guests seemed to be crumbling. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his work, but the atmosphere around him had changed. Many of the guests now looked at him with respect, even admiration, and some even approached to thank him for the performance. He responded to everyone with the same humility as always, revealing nothing but gratitude. For him, that moment was just a glimpse of what his life had been, something he preferred to leave in the past. However, for those who had witnessed the scene, he was more than a janitor. He was a living reminder that talent and dignity could shine even in the most unexpected circumstances. Lucas, still close to the stage, was trying to compose himself as the murmurs in the hall seemed to grow louder. He knew that the suspicious glances and the whispers laden with disapproval were directed at him. With a tense smile, he raised a glass of champagne and spoke loudly enough for those around him to hear. "Well, folks, come on, it was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously. After all, we're here to have fun, right?" But the attempt to downplay the situation had no effect. The looks from some guests became even more critical, and the side conversations continued. "A joke?" murmured a woman, shaking her head in disapproval. "That was not funny at all. He tried to humiliate the guy." Another guest, a gray-haired man with a serious expression, commented in a stern tone, "It's unfortunate. It showed his true character. All that luxury and success, but no empathy." Lucas tried to laugh casually, as if he didn't notice the tension around him. He approached a group of guests and said, "You know how it is, right? A party needs unexpected moments. I just wanted to bring a little fun to the night." One of the men in the group stared at him for a few moments before responding coldly. "At the expense of someone who couldn't defend himself? That's not fun, Lucas. It's cruelty." Lucas's smile completely vanished. He let out a nervous laugh and murmured something incomprehensible before quickly stepping away, heading towards the back of the hall where Ethan was. The humiliation of having lost control of the night, and even more, the respect of his guests weighed heavily on his shoulders. Ethan was back to his work, collecting empty glasses and discreetly cleaning the edges of the tables, as if nothing had happened. His calm and focused demeanor contrasted with the surrounding atmosphere, still buzzing with conversations about his performance and Lucas's attitude. Ethan," Lucas said, approaching with his hands shoved in his pockets and a forced smile on his face. He looked uncomfortable, his words coming out in a hesitant tone. "I just wanted to say that, well, maybe things got a little out of control. You know how it is, I didn't mean to offend you. It was just a joke. I hope you understand." Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting Lucas's. There was something in his expression that was not resentment, but a firm calmness that made the moment even more unsettling for the host. He held the trash bag with one hand and replied serenely, "Don't worry, Mr. Lucas. What matters is how things end." The response, delivered without a hint of irony or resentment, left Lucas even more unsettled. He opened his mouth to say something but closed it again, unable to find the right words. He felt small, irrelevant in front of someone who, even being the target of his cruelty, had emerged with dignity and talent. As Lucas walked away, the guests continued to cast disapproving glances in his direction. Some murmured among themselves, and it was evident that he had lost the respect of most. The night, which should have been his grand celebration, was now marked by Ethan's unexpected brilliance and the stain of his own arrogance. Unable to bear the weight of the glances and the words that seemed to follow him wherever he went, Lucas decided to leave. With hurried steps, he exited the hall, the doors closing behind him. The music resumed and the atmosphere began to adjust again, but the incident was already etched in everyone's memory. Ethan, for his part, continued working, his presence now perceived in a completely different light, as a reminder that true greatness does not need luxury to shine. The days that followed the party brought changes that Ethan could never have predicted. The video of his performance, captured by one of the guests, began to circulate on social media. Initially, it was just a short clip, shared with captions like, "The janitor who moved the party," or "Unexpected talent amidst luxury." But within hours, the video went viral. Millions of people around the world watched, commented, and shared, enchanted by Ethan's voice and the contrast between his simplicity and the luxurious environment in which he had sung. "This man sings with his soul," read one comment. "How has he never been discovered before?" asked another. Soon the story behind the video began to be told as well. The humble janitor who faced a humiliating situation and responded with a performance that silenced a room full of rich and powerful people. The narrative touched the hearts of many, transforming Ethan into a symbol of resilience and authenticity. The response was overwhelming. Ethan began to receive messages of support from all corners. Music producers sent invitations for auditions. Old admirers who remembered his brief career as a singer reached out with words of encouragement, and even journalists wanted to interview him to tell his story. People were fascinated by the journey of a man who seemed destined to shine, but had, for unknown reasons, chosen a path away from the spotlight. Amid all this attention, Lucas emerged. For him, the video was a double blow. While Ethan's talent was celebrated, his own petty behavior had become the target of severe criticism. People who watched the video questioned how he, the host of the party, had treated someone with such disdain. Comments like, "Lucas tried to humiliate him and ended up humiliated," were common on social media. Lucas's image, built over the years as a successful and charismatic businessman, was in shambles. In a desperate attempt to clean up his reputation, Lucas sought out Ethan. He made several offers, from financial support to the promise of using his influence to boost the former janitor's new career. "I want to help you, Ethan," he said during a visit to the building where Ethan still worked. "I have contacts. I can open doors for you. We can do this together." But Ethan, with the same calmness he had shown on the night of the party, politely declined. "Thank you, Mr. Lucas," he said, looking directly into the businessman's eyes. "But this is a journey I need to walk on my own. I have accepted depending on others in the past, and that led me to lose who I really was. Now I want to walk on my own 2 feet." Lucas tried to insist, but Ethan's firm and respectful tone made it clear that the decision was final. For the first time, Lucas found himself at a loss for words and left the conversation with a new weight on his shoulders. Not just the weight of guilt, but the growing realization that, no matter how much power he had, he could not force respect or forgiveness from someone who no longer needed him. Meanwhile, Ethan began to embrace the opportunities that arose. He accepted an invitation from a renowned music producer to record a demo, something that quickly attracted the attention of record labels. Within weeks, Ethan was back doing what he loved, singing. This time he performed at small local shows, slowly building a solid and authentic path, unhurried but with the confidence of someone who knew he was in the right place. The culmination of his rebirth came on a special night, months later. Ethan took the stage of a large theater in New York, the same one where, years before, he had shone as a young promise. Now, however, he was no longer a promise. He was a reality, a living proof that true talent, when guided by humility and resilience, could overcome any obstacle. The room was packed. When Ethan stepped onto the stage, a wave of applause welcomed him, but he remained calm. He closed his eyes as he always did and let the music speak for itself. His voice, now even more mature and filled with emotion, filled the theater, drawing tears and smiles from everyone present. Each note seemed to tell the story of his journey, and the audience felt every word as if they were part of it. In the back, almost hidden among the crowd, was Lucas. He had discreetly bought a ticket, not wanting to be noticed. He watched the performance in silence, his face serious and arms crossed. For the first time, he seemed not to care about being the center of attention. As he watched Ethan command the stage with natural grace and a voice that captivated everyone in the room, Lucas felt something he rarely experienced, the realization of his own insignificance. When the show ended, Lucas left before the lights came on, without trying to greet Ethan or approach anyone. He knew that night was not about him. It was about Ethan, the man he had underestimated and who was now much greater than anything he could have imagined. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will also move you. Click to continue watching.